Welcome to another edition of Geekdom Movie Talk here on World of Geekdom. We're going to talk about the other big story of last week, besides just Transformers being a terrible, terrible movie. We're going to talk about the surprising shift in directors over in the Star Wars world. For those who don't know, the original directors of the Han Solo anthology movie, Phil Lord and Chris Miller, were removed from power, for lack of a better term. They were replaced by Ron Howard, and I want to do a discussion about why I think that Ron Howard would be a better choice. I know a lot of people were really shocked at this, and there's a lot of talk that it's pretty much telling the world that there's a lot of behind the scenes turmoil with Star Wars, with Lucasfilm, with Kathleen Kennedy, because we had something kind of similar happen with Rogue One, where they went in, they did a bunch of reshoots. This is different, though. I cannot remember a major movie, a major, like, big budget Disney, film that ever had directors removed near the end of principal photography. That's super freaking rare, and there's all kinds of articles and all kinds of scandals online you can read up. I'm not going to cover it too much, maybe a little bit, but we're going to talk about it here. And joining me, please welcome back to Geekdom Movie Talk, and please welcome to Geekdom, World of Geekdom, that is. If you've been on my other channel, you remember this man, of course, but if you haven't, please welcome Mike from Laughing Stock Media.
Hey
How's it
guys,
going?
it's Mike here from Hey guys, it's Mike here from Laughing Stock Media. How's it going?
Can you remember, like, obviously we always hear stories about backstage turmoil, creative problems and things like that. This thing with Lord and Miller, though, where at first they were removed and then we found out they were fired. It wasn't like they quit, they were fired by Kathleen Kennedy. Then several stories came out about how Lord and Miller hired like an acting coach, and for a Han
hmm
Solo actor, and how they had issues with Lawrence Kasdan. Have you ever heard of a movie firing its directors this late? Like, I remember the Super Mario movie had tons and tons of problems with directors, but not when they started shooting. In fact, it got to the point where, like, there were stories that the directors on that film put hot coffee down people's backs and were douchebags on the set. This is different, though. This is like the studio coming in there and saying, you know what, you're out. I can't remember something like this ever happening.
Uh, Honestly, I don't know off the top of my head if I can really think of a situation like this because there's like development hell that a lot of movies go through where they keep swapping in like new directors or new visions with different screenplays and different takes. And then eventually we get the movie and it's a gigantic mess because all these different people have this different input and they just create this amalgamation that we saw on the screen, which obviously isn't very cohesive. But like, we had something like The Hobbit where like Guillermo del Toro was trying to make that movie for years and then they finally just got rid of him and they brought in Peter Jackson, but like that wasn't during the production, especially not
Right.
this late into the movie. And like what I've heard about how they might just basically be like remaking the movie and adding like all this extra time and all these extra shots and shoots again, this seems very unusual.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, it's 4.5 months of filming, and now Kathleen Kennedy came in, said, "Nope, you're out. Ron Howard's in." And I think, as far as I remember, I think the reason why Ron Howard's gonna have to reshoot so many things is because one of two reasons. Number one, it's gonna be his movie now, so obviously he has to redo things. And number two, it's like that situation about what happened with Superman 2, about how they have to shoot. I believe the rule was, and if I'm wrong on this, my apologies. I don't remember, but I think if you shoot 52% of the movie new, you don't have to credit the previous director. So it's almost like Ron Howard would have to reshoot more than half of the movie in order to take full credit for directing, even though I still think they're going to give Lord and Miller, credit. The whole thing
Yeah.
is weird because, like, the story that we heard was that Kathleen Kennedy wants to use these young directors, like, Gareth Edwards for Rogue One, Colin Trevorrow for Episode 9. We actually had heard that Josh Trank the man who the man who had a meltdown over Fantastic Four had been hired to direct a future anthology movie. He had been pretty much in there, like from Disney. We're not sure
Then he
which
got
one.
Josh tanked, and he kind of ruined that chance.
Yes, he did. Sabotage his own movie, bro. But you know, again, young directors getting a chance here. So I guess what happened was, Kathleen Kennedy saw these guys had like some momentum, and as a result of that, they went in there and she gave him an opportunity. But I don't know about you, Mike, but from the beginning, now number one, I want to say I have nothing against Lord and Miller, okay, at all.
Yeah.
Like I just don't. When I look at them, I look at their resume of films. They did Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, 21 Jump Street, the Lego Movie, 22 Jump Street, and they helped produce other things like The Storks and, you know, the sequel to Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. And I just look at these guys and I'm like, they're funny. They have nice, you know, good humor, but they don't really come off like Star Wars. Like I never sensed these guys being a good fit for the Star Wars universe. And I think the idea was that they wanted to make Han Solo kind of I guess like a comedic character because he's always got one-liners. But the thing about Han Solo is I never saw him as a comedy character. He had one-liners, but he was always like a suave ladies' man badass who had one-liners, like, you know, like Bruce Willis or Arnold. That's how I always saw Han Solo. But I have a feeling that, and we may never see their version of the movie. We may not even know what the hell it entails. But I wonder if maybe their version was too silly, I guess, for Lawrence Kasdan and Kathleen Kennedy. That's what we had heard. But based on their previous resume, it's hard to argue that.
Yeah, I actually have liked all of their films I've seen thus far. You know, Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs is a decent animated movie. I find the 21 and 22 Jump Street movies pretty funny. I think I like the first one a little bit more, though. But when it comes down to it, I don't think that they're really a good fit for Star Wars because, like, it seems like everyone in all these franchises are trying to make everything overly comedic nowadays, but, you know, you can't make Star Wars into some kind of like slapstick, you know, nonstop comedy thrill ride. I mean, Episode 7, for example, was they had a lot more comedy than even, you know, the usual Star Wars, but that worked fine. You know, imagine turning that up to 11 here. But there are some other things I did hear about their direction on the set that kind of leads me to think that maybe it was another problem. For example, I heard that Kennedy and the people who were overseeing the film basically wanted them to shoot a number of scenes. So, like, I don't know, 15, 17, 19, something like that, a number of shots per, like, certain scenes so that they could edit the film in a variety of different ways and see how they wanted it to turn out. However, Lord and Miller, I guess, had only shot, like, a few different shots per scene, so it made it much harder for them to edit it. Additionally, one of the problems I heard was that they're really used to letting their actors basically have more creative freedom to do ad libs, to basically choose their own lines. Sometimes, you know, they'll say this instead.
Well, I heard the opposite. I heard that Phil Lord and Chris Miller are very strict or script wise, and that Kasdan's more of a loose guy. That's what I had heard.
Well, I had heard the opposite. Maybe I read incorrectly, but, you know, it just seems like everything that they were doing was completely not meshing with everything that Kasdan and Kennedy wanted, which, you know, it makes me question why they were really hired. You know, they are, I guess, young up-and-coming directors. You know, they've made some hits, so it makes sense to put them into a franchise that you also want to have hits. But to have something so completely different in tone, and then to bring in someone like Ron Howard, whose films are completely different, who he doesn't really make that kind of slapstick comedy, even though he was on Happy Days, you know. But it's just, I don't know. I feel like Howard is just a much better suited director for this.
Well, we're going to talk about that here in a moment. I want to save the Ron Howard talk for just a moment, but I have to ask you, because this has been the big topic right now. This is like the topic right now when it comes to movie guys. And it started really, I mean, it's been going on for years. Actually, one of the earliest examples of this was what happened with Alien 3 and Fincher. And then, of course, we have the story with Age of Ultron and Joss Whedon, you know, which is the whole directors versus studio. Like, I feel like one of the issues going on now with Disney and with, and I say all of Disney, Marvel and Star Wars and other things, that I feel like the studio has a lot of control over these films, more so than even the directors, which is why we've heard these problems. And then that begs the question, like, if you're gonna hire a director, right, there has to be some semblance of trust. You have to trust what the guy's gonna do. But I feel like what's going on is they hire the directors and they trust them to a degree, but if their vision is so different from the vision the studio wants, they just put the kibosh on it, or they go in there and they start making executive decisions. Which is like, for example, the Age of Ultron thing, how Joss Whedon did not want that scene with Thor, that Vision Quest scene to set up the third Thor movie. He didn't want that in there, but Kevin Feige insisted because they had bigger plans. And then, like, I'm in a weird spot right now as far as a fan goes, because I respect these directors, but at the same time, I guess the case-by-case thing, because, look, I just don't think Lord Miller fit with the Han Solo movie. And I'll be perfectly honest with you, Mike. I don't even want the Han Solo movie. And I'll tell you why. A lot of people, I know you put a poll on Twitter recently about this, a lot of people love Han Solo, but the thing about that character is that the reason why he worked is because, I don't know how to really describe it. Try to follow me here, but you don't want that character to get overexposed.
Yeah.
Meaning, you want him to be, he's a good sort of secondary main character, because obviously Star Wars is about Luke and now it's about Rey more than Han Solo. And the thing about that character is one of the big things that made him cool was how mysterious he was. He was a smuggler, he dealt with bounty hunters and the Star Wars underworld. But when you make a movie about him that could humanize him and could make him into like, oh, he had this happen to him, he had that happen to him, I just wonder, if that's a good idea for that character. I just don't know if he should get his own movie because of that, because I think that's better to keep him as mysterious as possible.
Yeah, it's a weird comparison to make, but I have been thinking about this recently. It's almost like Rob Zombie's remake of the Halloween films, where they went way too far into Michael Myers' background to the point where we just didn't care about him anymore as a character, and it actually ruined him.
Yeah, his whole thing is he's supposed to be mysterious.
Yeah, so I kind of hope that this Han Solo film doesn't take this dashing rogue of Han Solo, who's kind of an asshole, and then make him into this really nice, good guy who always fought for the rebellion and was always like on the side of good and basically wasn't just doing stuff on his own, like demystifying the character to the point where he's just another character, or where you basically take his archetype that many characters afterwards have been based on, and you just turn him into one of those characters that are based on Han Solo instead of actually being Han Solo. But yeah, I completely agree, because I would have preferred to see like an Obi-Wan film, in between the two trilogies, or really something like in the Old Republic. There's so many different areas that they could explore, and just going with a Han Solo movie because people know who Han Solo is, it doesn't really, it's not really up my alley as much, but obviously I'm still going to see it.
Me too. It's just, I think that character should be more mysterious. I mean, I think Boba Fett is one that people want to know more about, but I think we've seen enough Han Solo. Now, let's talk about Ron Howard. Now, the difference between Ron Howard and Lord Miller, Ron Howard has quite the resume. I mean, Ron Howard is an Academy Award-winning director, not one, but two. I mean, he won Beautiful Mind, but he was nominated for Frost Nixon. Or Frost Nixon. What the fuck? Frost Nixon. I don't know where I got Dixon from. I'm thinking about dicks. I don't know. Frost Nixon. Now, I'm not a fan of his Da Vinci movies, but he has a pretty... He's way more experienced than Lord Miller. I mean, the dude, he did Night Shift, which I think is a very underrated film. He did Cocoon, which I think was probably the first big movie. And then, of course, the big one that he did was Willow, which featured... it was produced by George Lucas. It's got Warwick Davis in it. Like, it's almost like it was done in ILM. It's pretty much it's not really a Star Wars movie, but it kind of fits that, I guess, Lucas, because he wrote the story as well. It's that whole like Lucas. Yeah, and so I think, he's definitely knows Lucas better than Lord and Miller do, but he's never really worked with Lucas. I'm sorry, Lucas is not really working with these guys now, even though I'm sure he'll stop by the Han Solo set to check it out. And, of course, he did Apollo 13. I think Ron Howard is a better choice, because when I see a movie like, again, I already said it, like Apollo 13 or Ransom or Night Shift, or, you know, I don't know. I feel like he fits Star Wars better. I really
Yeah.
do. I think he fits Star Wars better. And again, same thing with Willow. Like Willow's kind of like a Star Wars movie. Like it's got that kind of feel to it. So I gotta be honest. I almost wonder why he wasn't picked from the beginning.
I really don't know. I mean, when they decided that Ron Howard was going to be the one directing it, I was a little bit surprised because even though I think it's a good choice, I just think it's odd that, as you said, they didn't pick him from the beginning. And, maybe he's not really busy enough to where he could take a movie, because even though, like, he's made a lot of classic movies, he's still making movies. Like, he made Rush, which was pretty good with Chris Hemsworth.
And he made In the Heart of the Sea, which
Yeah.
I haven't seen. I haven't seen it, but I heard bad things.
It was all right, but overall it was more like the story than the direction. Like his direction and the feeling of his movies, he always pretty much gets down in a good way. So like attaching that to Star Wars just feels much better in my opinion than attaching them, because you know I just don't know. It's so weird. Like even the two compared next to one another are just completely different. Like Ron Howard isn't going to make those kinds of movies that Lord and Miller are going to make, and vice versa. Like they could always make more serious movies in the future, but like, yeah, an Apollo movie seems a little bit more up a Star Wars alley or Willow than 21 or 22 Jump Street. So I definitely agree that he's a better choice.
Yeah. Now, last topic before we get out of here, because I think so too. I think a lot of people are freaking out over this, but I think that I mean, all these movies have production problems, and now we have like the second example of this, and
Yeah.
I just wonder what's going on there. But
Well, all these movies are really like producer driven. That's something I was thinking about before. Like it's like Marvel,
they're
or
corporate. That's the
yeah.
word. They're corporate. Now, and that's kind of my next topic is, what exactly do you think? I mean, do you think we're going to hit an era now where, because look, a lot of movie fans will have said things to me like, oh, I would love it if Christopher Nolan or Quentin Tarantino or Robert Rodriguez directed a Star Wars movie. It's just never going to happen because that style, like their unique style. Like JJ has a very film nerdy style, but I think he fits with Star Wars because of films, Super 8, the Star Trek movies. He's much more of a nerd and he's willing to play ball. Not to mention that when JJ first came in, this is something that fans have to understand. The difference between JJ and like some of the other directors is that JJ got a crap load of creative control. JJ actually laid the foundation out for a lot of these characters. Kylo Ren was a JJ creation. Like JJ really had a lot of control, whereas Colin Trevorrow for episode 9 will not have that kind of control because he's already got 2 movies to build off of. He can't just start up his own universe.
Yeah.
So the whole thing is like, how do you feel about the corporate entities, I guess, taking control of these films? And do you think that it's going to turn into an industry now where we've got these paycheck directors who are really just there to say action and cut, and their vision will never be respected as much as they feel it should, making movies on one side of Hollywood? Then on the other side of Hollywood, you have Hateful Eight and Dunkirk and these visionary directors who are going to make movies, but they're not going to get anywhere near the promotion or the cinematic universe element, which is a big deal right now for Marvel and for DC and for all these other ones that are coming out. I covered that a few times, and I'll have a video coming up with Reel to Reel covering more about this. But like, do you think that these guys are going to end up like these artists, these Nolan, Tarantino types? Are they going to end up just kind of making these artistic movies and losing out on potential money because they're not willing to play ball? Like, is that where we're going right now? Are we going to this era where it's like commercial movies and then like artistic movies, or has it always really been this way?
I feel in some ways it's moving a little bit more towards that than even how it's been in the past, but I can definitely see both sides. Obviously on one side, movies are art. You want the director and his real vision to really be shown on the screen, to see exactly what he wants to put forward, but on the other hand, when we think about it, each of these films is a piece of a larger franchise, and while each of these films is like $100 or so million to make, the overall franchise is potentially billions. So when they put movies in the hands of someone, they want to make sure that this someone is someone who's going to return their money on their investment. So I feel like that's the reason why these producers have so much more overall sway than the directors themselves, because the producer is the one that's basically controlling the money. You know, this is the guy who has the pocketbook, basically, or the female in this case. So when it comes to that, I feel like maybe like a big director like a Tarantino or a Martin Scorsese could come into like Star Wars or Marvel or something and have a lot more sway because of how big of a director they are. But again, Quentin Tarantino doesn't normally make movies that are gigantic blockbusters that make hundreds of millions or billions of dollars. So I feel like if someone like Christopher Nolan came in or someone like that, they might have a little bit more sway just because they're all looking at the bottom line. They're all looking at the dollar signs. So are they going to want the dollar signs back, or are they going to want, you know, a more artistically free film? I feel like that's pretty much where it comes down to.
Yeah, it's gonna end up. That's kind of where we're at right now. Like, I feel like these big companies that control movies and movie franchises are gonna have final say.
Yeah.
And the artistic directors are going to keep making the old school movies, which is, 2-hour or 2.5-hour self-contained stories. Like everything Tarantino's pretty much done. His universe is loose, but it's like loosely connected, but it's not really directly connected. And I feel like, that unless you have like a Kevin Smith where you're purposely creating movies that are in a shared universe, the View Askew universe, I just feel like it's one of those things where you kind of have to play ball with the studio. I'm not saying I like it. I know a lot of film fans are upset about this.
Yeah.
I know a lot of what I've noticed is like a lot of hardcore film fans are crucifying Kathleen Kennedy for firing Lord and Miller because, you didn't agree with our direction. I'm over here thinking, well, I respect the fact that they want directors to have control, because a lot of these people are like wannabe movie makers. Like, they're like, they're learning, they're avid, going to like, film school because they want to make movies. And I think they put themselves in Lord and Miller's place. Like, okay, well, if you're going to hire me, you better know who the hell you're hiring, which again, I agree with that.
Yeah.
But for this specific example, I just don't think Lord and Miller fit, dude. I gotta be honest. Ron Howard's better. I mean, we'll see how the movie comes out, but I think Ron Howard's a better choice.
I think it really comes down to picking your battles, because like this is just like a Han Solo standalone movie. I don't even know if this is going to be anywhere near as successful as the other films. I'm sure they're going to promote the crap out of this movie. Like, we're going to see trailers everywhere, but like, I mean, I don't know if Alden Ehrenreich really has the kind of star appeal. I don't know if people are really as interested in that Han Solo idea as they would have been for like an Obi-Wan trilogy or something, like I feel like there's more marketable, bankable things out there that they could be doing. So maybe in this case, I really don't think it's really that big of a war to kind of stake yourself on in terms of creative freedom, because, the creative freedom in this case might have hurt the film and the franchise overall. But like, if it comes to like episode 9 and we find out, there was all these amazing things that were going to happen, but the studio said no, well, I think that's a much bigger deal than a Han Solo standalone movie.
I would agree. All right, well, let us know your thoughts in the comments about how you feel about the Han Solo movie. Do you care about the movie? Do you care about who's directing it? Would you rather have another character, get his own movie? And also check out Mike from Laughingstock Media. I'll leave a link to his channel in the description. So we'll see y'all later.
See you later.